Oh hey guys, your furnace doesn't work? That sucks. Let's get started. I should give the disclaimer that I'm not an HVAC guy. I'm not a furnace specialist. I'm really not a specialist in anything. But what I am is tenacious and capable, like most of you watching this video. We're just do-it-yourselfers. This is what I've learned. Check your thermostat. That was a bit violent. If I'm going too quick, you can pause it. You can re-watch it. That's the beauty of YouTube. Make sure your batteries are working. Is your thermostat working? We don't know. How can we bypass that? Well, what we can do is we can take this wire here. It's the white wire. We can connect it to the red wire. This is all low voltage up here, so you can't fry yourself, so don't worry about it. So how do we do that? There's a little one of these micro screws in here. Try and get this thing to focus. Sorry, I'm holding this with one hand. Let's go ahead and stick our micro bit in here. We'll loosen her up. And they're going to take this little guy and we're going to connect her to the red wire. Does your furnace fire up? You should be able to hear it. You can hear it through your vents, your inducer blower motor going. If it still doesn't work, there's some other problem. If it does work, then you've bypassed your thermostat and there's a problem with your thermostat. Check the batteries, maybe the unit needs to replace. Who knows? Moving along. Now on our way to check to see what's wrong with the furnace and continue our troubleshooting here, you want to turn the power off to your furnace. There's juice running to it. You don't want to mess with it when it's live. So most of you have a switch like this, kill it. If you don't, move along to your breaker panel. And you guys know how this stuff works. You got your codes here for your stuff. Find whatever breaker your furnace is on and kill it. Moving along. Now here we are. And this is the bane of my existence for the last week and a half, as I'm sure many of you are in the same situation. This thing doesn't work. It's the coldest year we've had in a long time, so let's go ahead and get her fired up. Or at least try our best. Open her up here. This is nothing fancy. This is a high efficiency furnace, as I imagine most of you have here. You've got your exhaust running through PVC piping coming out the side of my house here. You've got a water pump here that takes care of your condensation. Let's go ahead and just open the whole thing up here. Take off the bottom panel because it's important to understand how these things work. And as all do-it-yourselfers can agree, the more you understand how something works, the better you can diagnose its problems. Okay, and sorry for the chaos here. I'm trying to do this with one hand. You can try to just kill the power to your furnace for a good, 5 minutes or so, and then turn it back on and see if that'll reset your motherboard here. To see if that helps. Also, there's a little light down here on the motherboard itself. Let me just try and get the focus going here, please. There's a little light here. Now this, if there's a problem, most times, if you're lucky, this light will blink. And it will blink in a specific way that will give you a certain code, And most of the time, I think they're listed right on the panel here on your furnace, and if they're not, I imagine you can find it in the user's manual. Now the problem with mine was it was flashing 3 times. Pressure switch open with inducer on. There's your pressure switch. It was sensing that there was a problem with the pressure, and I discovered that there was actually a clog in this vent outside. I'll talk about that here in a second. So here you have it. It probably looks pretty familiar to what you've got on your end here. Here you've got your motherboard, which the same as you'd have in a computer. It's the brains of the operation, communicates with everything, right? So let's go over the process, the procedural process, how this thing works, so we can better understand what's going on. And again, this is stuff I've just learned off the last couple days reading off the internet, so I'm just helping you guys out. Help share the wealth, right? So you've got a cord running here. In my case, it's zip tied to my gas line. It's running up to my thermostat. So the thermostat calls for heat. It sends voltage down through this wire to the motherboard. So the motherboard then begins to initiate the process. The first thing that happens is this sucker here. I believe they call this an inducer motor. You've got two fan type contraptions in your furnace. You've got the inducer motor, and you've got the big brother here, which is the actual blower motor, which delivers heat through your air ducts. So the first things that happen, this thing's going to start to fire up. Now if this thing doesn't fire up, again, it could be a problem with your thermostat, could be the power going to the furnace, could be this device itself which has failed. It may need to be replaced. You know, you can smell around it, you know, see if you can smell if the motor's been burned out. Feel it if it's hot. It shouldn't be hot to the touch. It should be warm if it's been running. Some other things that can go wrong here, like animals and stuff can get up inside your vent here, your exhaust tubing, and they can get in here and they can get stuck. So if this does start up and it sounds gurgled, or it sounds unbalanced, or you hear stuff in here and it's scratchy or anything, it should sound really smooth when it fires up. So if you hear any of that, there's a good chance there's something that's interfering with its operation. It's got stuck in here, and you can remove these. It's not too hard. There's a bolt here. There's another one in here. Just be careful. You know, loosen these clamps and then kind of angle the thing out. Gotta be careful. There's so many delicate pieces in this thing. There's a lot of technology in modern furnaces I never realized. I've learned a lot about them. So if everything's okay with this, it's going to go ahead and communicate with this guy here. And again, it's all a procedural process. Every step, it's like a bridge. You have to cross all these bridges for this thing to start producing heat and work as it's supposed to. So if this thing's good, it's going to start communicating with this guy here, which is a pressure switch, I believe. It's just a little membrane that senses the amount of positive pressure or lack thereof, negative pressure, I guess you'd call it. It's a safety feature. It wants to make sure that your exhaust isn't clogged or anything like that. It wants to make sure there's not excess moisture in the system. It wants to make sure that your inducer motor is removing carbon monoxide and stuff properly before it turns this sucker on. It's got tubes and stuff. It's got control. It's got wires that send voltage back down to the motherboard. Now, reasons this can fail, if it makes it to this step, is the membrane in here is broken, water or rust, you know, or other deposits of anything that have gotten inside this little guy, and it's really sensitive. You can replace them on eBay. You can find them on Amazon. If you find out it's broken and you want to go that route, you have to make sure, come on, focus. See here, it says the pressure. This is negative 0.65. You have to make sure you replace it with one that is rated for the same pressure, because this is a safety feature. And if this fails, or sorry, if it doesn't make it past this step, then it could be a problem with it, but most likely, from what I've read, it's an indication of another problem. So if this fails, it's most likely because this thing's clogged. It doesn't like maybe the amount of air that's coming into the intake. It wants more, or maybe it senses that there's too much pressure in the exhaust, and maybe there's a clog in there, so it'll shut the process down. So if this fires up, but this doesn't, then you got to look at what's going on. Now, if this likes the pressure, what's going to happen next is back in here, this little guy is called an igniter. Now, essentially, it's just a superheated rod that has current sent through it, and it heats back in here. You can't really see it. It heats red hot and it's what it ignites the flame. So if you'll see this compartment start to glow a bright orange. Now, reasons that it doesn't make it to this process or this process fails is because you have a damaged igniter. Again, you can replace those. You can get one off the internet. Now, if the igniter's going and it communicates with the board and it likes everything it sees, it's going to open this gas valve. It's going to allow gas to pass through here, up in here, up in here to these burners, which are these guys up in here. I've got a row of them there. And the very moment, you'll hear the valve open, click, and you'll hear a little bit of gas. And the very moment it lets gas into this chamber, because you've got this red hot rod back in here, it's gonna ignite, and you'll see the blue flames ignite. Now, you've made it to that step. So what's the furnace going to do next? It's going to utilize this mechanism over here, which they call a flame sensor, which is a really, as far as I can tell, a basic piece of technology. There it is there. It's just a little, again, a rod that, if reaches high temperatures, it wants to tell the motherboard that, yes, I sense a flame. I can sense a flame burning, so move to the next step. Now, if you see that your flames ignite, but then they turn off shortly after, that could be because your flame sensor is damaged, or more commonly, it is dirty. They get deposits of stuff on there. So you can take that out right here. Loosen that, pull it out carefully, and you can clean it with, I've read that steel wool is good. You can kind of gently rub off any minerals or anything that have deposited to it, and then put it back in. If the flame sensor likes what it senses, which is flame, it'll send a signal back to the control board, the motherboard, and then you'll go to the last and final step, which is this guy will activate, the big brother, and that's the guy that will suck air in through your cold air returns, pass it through your filter, which I don't have installed right now. That's another thing. Make sure your filter's clean, and blow it through all your air ducts throughout your house. And then your reducer motor will continue to run and take away all the harmful byproducts and blow them out the side of your house. So it's important to know how the whole process works, and that's pretty much it from what I can understand. Again, I'm no expert. So let's go ahead and see how this process works from start to finish. We're going to go ahead and fire it up and watch the sequence. So here on your panel is a little kill switch. So the same sort of thing you'll find on your refrigerator door. If it decompresses, the whole system shuts down. You know, in case the bottom panel comes off it, your kids don't get their fingers stuck in these high-speed fans and stuff. Just a safety feature. Let's go ahead and push that in and see what happens here. I'll use my foot so we can hold everything together here. So here's your reducer motor. It turns on. What it's doing is it's clearing the system of any potential gases that are left over, and it's communicating with the pressure switch right now. Now if the pressure switch likes the pressure, doesn't sense any clogs or anything, it's going to fire up this igniter. You'll see it. It's glowing bright orange. There she is. Now the igniter will go for another 10 seconds or so. Then the gas valve is going to let some gas in. And you'll see the burners fire up here shortly. There they are. Burners will fire up. If the flame sensor likes the flame, then we're going to go ahead and fire up the main blower in another 10 seconds or so. Let's see what happens. Come on, baby. And there's the main blower. Everything's working. That's how your furnace should work. That's the sequence. Good luck, guys. Hope you get to the bottom of it.